Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we're opening a new case file in what we've started calling Project Blackwood.
Project Blackwood. It has a bit of a covert ring to it, doesn't it?
It does, but our goal is actually opposite. It's about full transparency. We're using this as our label for a specific kind of deep dive.
A post-mortem.
Exactly. We're not just looking at a business story. We're exploring, analyzing, and really tracing the trajectory of companies that didn't just succeed. They defined their markets. They were a part of the culture.
The giants. The ones that felt like they were just too big to fail.
Until they weren't. And now they serve as these incredible cautionary tales. The mission here is to understand why it happened.
Not the headline you see scrolling on a news channel.
No, not at all. We want to find the structural why, the hitting why. We want to find the cracks that started forming in the foundation maybe 20 years before the whole house came down.
It's what we call the data-to-drama approach.
Yeah.
The numbers, they almost always tell the story long before the official press release does.
Precisely. And for our first file in Project Blackwood, we're looking at a company that was, you could argue, the grandmother of the entire modern gig economy.
Oh, easily. A company that basically invented social commerce a full century before anyone had even heard of the internet.
A company that was empowering millions of women, giving them a path to economic independence at a time when they couldn't even vote in the U.S.
Today, we are talking about Avon Products, Inc.
An absolute institution.
A cultural icon.
And the hook here is just, it's fascinating, and frankly, it's a little sad. This is a brand that was synonymous with the friendly face at your door. The ding-dong, Avon calling.
It was a staple. It was part of the American household.
And yet, on August 14th, 2024, that same company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in Delaware.
It's a staggering fall from grace. I mean, to go from defining the American suburban dream to a liquidation trust in a Delaware courtroom.
So that's the central question for today. How? How does a brand built on this massive decentralized army of people, its greatest asset, how does it collapse under the weight of debt, legal scandals, and just a flat-out inability to modernize?
That really is the heart of it. And if you look at the source material we've compiled, the Project Blackwood analysis keeps pointing to this one core irony.
Which is?
That Avon's greatest strength, the human element, eventually became its Achilles heel.
The human element.
Right. For decades, that human sales force was their moat. It was the one thing a department store just couldn't replicate. But as the world changed, managing that human element, well, that's where the trouble started.
What do you mean by managing it?
Think about it. Dealing with bribery scandals in foreign markets to keep growth numbers up, trying to manage commission structures when inflation is squeezing everyone, and then the ultimate failure, ensuring the physical safety of the products those people were selling, neighbor to neighbor.
That became the fatal liability.
It's what brought the whole thing down.
Okay, let's unpack all of this. Because to really understand the funeral, you have to understand the life. And I want to start not at the beginning, but at the absolute peak.
The calm before the storm.
Act 1. The setup and the contrast. So, take us back to the mid-2000s. Let's talk about the Andrea Young era.
Right. This is the period where, if you were just looking at the numbers on a spreadsheet, you'd think Avon was completely invincible. Andrea Young becomes CEO in 1999. She was the first female CEO, which was symbolically massive for them.
The company for women finally being run by a woman.
Exactly. And by 2005, that machine was just, it was firing on all cylinders.
Give us the metrics. What does that scale look like?
Okay, so in 2005, their net sales topped $8 billion. Operating profit was over $1.1 billion. The stock price had nearly tripled in Young's first 5 years.
Tripled. That's tech company behavior, not a legacy cosmetics brand.
Totally. And their global reach was over 5 million representatives. 5 million people. And just for a little context, because these big numbers can get a bit abstract, Avon's biggest rivals were they were dwarfed. Mary Kay was sitting around $2.4 billion in sales. Revlon was at about $1.35 billion. Avon at over $8 billion wasn't just winning, they were lapping the competition.
So they're the undisputed heavyweight champion of direct selling. They're dominant in Brazil, Russia. They're breaking into China.
They're everywhere.
Okay, so now let's fast forward. The current reality. The contrast is, wow, it's brutal.
It is. August 14th, 2024, the filing in Delaware. But I want to pause here for a second because the headlines around this were a little confusing for the average person.
Right, because I can still go online and buy an Avon lipstick today. In the UK and Brazil, it looks like business as usual. So who or what actually went bankrupt?
And this brings us to a concept analysts call the hollow corporation.
Okay, define that for me. A hollow corporation.
It's kind of a legal magic trick.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely crucial to understanding how big companies fail in the modern era. So imagine Avon as a house. Over the last decade, they've been selling off the furniture. The entire North American business, for example, was sold to a private equity firm years ago. The international operations, the profitable parts, were mostly under the umbrella of Nat & Co., the Brazilian beauty giant.
So the valuable furniture is already gone.
Right. So what was left in the specific corporate entity that filed for Chapter 11 Avon Products, Inc., was basically just the empty frame of the house and a flooded basement.
And the basement is filled with
Toxic debt and lawsuits. So the entity that actually filed for bankruptcy doesn't make or sell anything in the U.S. anymore. It's just a shell that owns the liabilities.
the container for all the bad stuff.
It's a containment unit for failure. The filing was a strategic move to deal with that mess without taking down the profitable, functioning parts of the global brand.
And the cost of that failure is just astronomical.
We're talking $1.3 billion in funded corporate debt. But the real killer, the thing that just bleeds a company dry, is the legal spend.
The talc litigation.
They had spent over $225 million just defending against talc lawsuits.
Just on defense, that's not even including the payouts.
That number includes some settlements, but yeah, a huge chunk of that is just the cost of keeping the lawyers in the courtroom day after day.
Wow. So you go from a $1.1 billion operating profit in 2005 to spending $250 million just fighting lawsuits in 2024.
That's the trajectory.
Yeah.
And from our Project Blackwood perspective, the data to drama lens, this wasn't some sudden heart attack.
It was a slow poisoning.
Exactly. It was a slow erosion that you could see in the numbers for years before the headlines finally caught up. The thesis that's really emerging from the documents is that Avon's fall reveals, one, the incredible fragility of these legacy selling models in a digital world, and two, maybe more importantly, the catastrophic cost of ignoring compliance and safety.
Let's go back to the source then. Because to understand how they built this legacy selling model, we have to go back a lot further than I think most people would guess. We're not talking about the 1950s.
No, not at all. We're going back to the Victorian era, the late 19th century.
Act 2. Origins and early days. The accidental empire.
And it really, really was an accident.
So introduce us to the founder.
His name was David H. McConnell. And in 1886, he wasn't a beauty guru. He wasn't a chemist or a fashion expert. He was a book salesman.
A book salesman.
Yeah, he worked for a company called the Union Publishing Company, and he was what they called a commercial drummer. He'd go door to door, mostly in rural New York.
Yeah.
And he had a classic sales problem.
Yeah.
How do you get a busy housewife who was maybe a little suspicious of a strange man at her door to stop and listen to you talk about books?
You need an icebreaker, a hook.
Exactly. So he started carrying these little vials of rose perfume that he actually mixed himself. He'd offer it as a small gift to, lower their defenses, and then he'd launch into his sales pitch for the books.
And I have a feeling the books weren't the star of the show.
Not even close. The aha moment for him was realizing that the women were way more interested in the perfume, the hook, than the actual product he was supposed to be selling. They started asking him, "This is lovely. Can I buy more of this?"
That's a classic startup pivot. You realize your side hustle is the main event.
And McConnell was smart enough to see the economics of it, too. Think about it. A book is a one-time purchase.
Yeah.
You buy a dictionary, you're set for a decade, right?
Right.
But perfume, that's a consumed, used-up good. He realized if he could sell something that runs out, he'd have a recurring revenue model.
It's the subscription model before subscriptions were even a thing.
Precisely. So what does he do? He buys half of the Union Publishing Company for $500.
$500.
That was his seed money. And he pivots the whole operation to manufacturing perfumes. Simple scents like rose, violet, heliotrope.
And this is where the strategy gets really clever. He didn't just change the product, he completely changed the distribution model. He didn't try to get his perfumes into big city department stores.
No, he called it the firm without walls. He was working out of a small space on Chambers Street in New York, just making the perfume and shipping it directly. No retail overhead, no middlemen. He kept the full margin.
But he still had to get it into people's homes, and this is where the social engineering part comes in.
McConnell identified this really important sociological truth of the 1880s. A man, a peddler, knocking on a woman's door is an intrusion. It's suspicious. He's a stranger.
But a neighbor.
But a neighbor, a woman from the community dropping by, that's just a visit. He realized women were uniquely positioned to sell to other women inside their own social circles.
And this is where Mrs. Elby comes in.
Persis Foster Eames Elby. You absolutely cannot tell the story of Avon without talking about her. She was the architect of respectability for the whole model.
Because at that time, being a peddler wasn't exactly a high-status job, right? It was almost seen as a form of begging.
It was seen as just a step above vagrancy, really. But Mrs. Albee was different. She was a 50-year-old mother. She was the president of the local literary guild in Winchester, Vermont. She had standing in her community. She had a certain gravitas.
So McConnell recruits her.
And she brings this middle-class respectability to the job. She basically created the template for what an Avon lady would be.
She created the mold.
She did. She was the very first traveling agent. And by 1900, under her leadership, the company, which was still called the California Perfume Company back then, had 48 of these lead agents who had recruited over 6,500 door-to-door sales managers.
6,500 reps in 1900. That is incredible scaling for a world with no phones, no internet.
And here's the foundational mindset analysis for Project Blackwood. This early, massive success baked a deep, deep reliance on personal relationships into the company's DNA. They didn't need advertising because Mrs. Albee and her network were the advertising.
You know, we call this direct selling, but isn't this really just the original gig economy? Mrs. Albee was basically an Uber driver, but for perfume.
That is the perfect analogy. She was an independent contractor.
Yeah.
She set her own hours. She controlled her own little territory. And just like you see Uber drivers today getting upset when the algorithm changes their pay.
We'll see later that the Avon reps revolted when the commission structure was changed on them.
It's the exact same dynamic, just separated by 130 years. It's the innovator's dilemma, and it was baked into the company from day one.
How so?
Well, when your entire empire is built on the idea that all business is personal, you're probably going to be very, very slow to adopt impersonal tools like, say, e-commerce a century down the line.
So they have the model. Now they need to build the brand. And this brings us to Act 3, the rise to prominence.
The boom years.
So when does the California Perfume Company actually become Avon?
It's a gradual process. They introduced the Avon brand name for a line of products in 1929. McConnell was a big Shakespeare fan, so we named it after Stratford-upon-Avon.
Very classy.
Always chasing that respectability. Then, in 1939, they officially renamed the whole corporation to Avon Products, Inc., and they focus obsessively on building trust. In 1931, they got the Good Housekeeping seal of approval for 11 of their products.
And at that time, that was the gold standard.
It was like getting a 5-star review, FDA approval, and a viral TikTok video all rolled into one. It meant you were legitimate.
And then they go public.
1946. But the real explosion, the moment they become this dominant cultural force, is in the 1950s and 60s.
The suburban gold rush.
You have to think about the sociology of post-World War II America. You have this massive migration out of the cities and into the suburbs. You have millions of women who are, by societal design, housewives. They're home all day. They're a little isolated from the old city centers. It was completely by accident the perfect ecosystem for door-to-door sales to flourish.
And this is when we get the iconic slogan.
Ding dong, Avon calling.
Yeah.
From 1954 to 1967, that jingle was everywhere. And it wasn't just an ad. It was a brilliant piece of psychological conditioning.
How do you mean?
They spent millions of dollars convincing America that the Avon lady wasn't a salesperson. She was a friend dropping by. The ads always showed women who were happy, delighted to open the door. It completely neutralized the intrusiveness of a sales call.
It's wild to think about that because today, if my doorbell rings unexpectedly, my first instinct is to hide and pretend I'm not home.
Right, and that's the key cultural shift. In 1954, the doorbell was an invitation. Today, it's an intrusion. And Avon never really figured out how to digitize that ding-dong. You can't just slide into someone's DMs and create that same level of trust.
So what were the numbers looking like during this golden age?
Just explosive growth. Between 1950 and 1962, sales grew sixfold. By 1969, they hit $558 million in sales with 400,000 representatives. They were actually shrinking sales territories to pack more and more reps into the same neighborhoods, and it just kept working.
Now, I want to jump forward a bit to the 1990s because I think there's this perception that Avon was just, old-fashioned perfume and lipstick, but the sources show they made a really serious pivot into hard science.
They did. This was their innovation as a differentiator phase. In the 90s, they knew that the department store brands like Clinique and Estee Lauder were starting to beat them on prestige. Those brands were selling science, so Avon decided to compete on dermatology.
And this is the ANUW launch.
1992, the ANW skincare line. This was the very first mass-market product to feature alpha-hydroxy acids, or AHAs.
Which is standard in skincare now. You can get it at any drugstore.
Standard now, yes.
Yeah.
But in 1992, this was like something out of a science fiction movie for most people. AHAs work by chemically exfoliating the skin. And the thing is, they actually work. It was a huge hit, and it proved that Avon could compete on scientific innovation, not just on social connection.
And it fueled their global growth.
Absolutely. By 1992, their international sales hit $2.25 billion, officially surpassing their U.S. sales for the first time. They had successfully exported the model around the world.
So on paper, they have it all. They own the suburbs, they have a massive global footprint, and they're innovating in high-tech skincare. It sounds perfect.
It sounds perfect.
But this is Project Blackwood. So we know that somewhere the cracks are starting to form.
The cracks are always forming when things look the best.
Act 4. Emerging flaws. The hidden cracks.
If you look closely at the financial statements, even way back in the good times, there were some red flags.
Specifically, their debt load.
Yes, the 1980s foreshadowing. As early as 1988, their corporate debt had already hit $1.13 billion. That was 82.5% of their total capital.
That is an incredibly leveraged position.
It creates this profound fragility. Think of it like a household that's living large, but it's all on credit cards. You might have a nice car and a big house, but if you lose your job, or in a company's case, if the market turns, you have zero room to maneuver. You can't afford to innovate or pivot because all your cash is going to service the debt.
And the real tragedy, the one that if Shakespeare were writing this, he'd focus on.
The hubris moment.
The Caudy rejection, 2012.
The ultimate what if. The sliding doors moment for the whole company.
Walk us through what happened.
Okay, so picture it. It's 2012. Avon is visibly struggling, the stock price is falling, and in comes Coty, the fragrance giant. They own brands like Calvin Klein, Gucci. Perfumes are huge, and they make an offer.
A buyout
A
offer.
very generous one. They offer to acquire Avon for $10.7 billion. That worked out to $23.25 per share.
Which sounds like a lifeline.
It was golden parachute. It was a way out. But CEO Andrea Young and the board, they rejected it.
Why? I mean, were they just delusional or did they actually have a better plan?
Their public statement called the offer opportunistically timed. They claimed it undervalued the company's long-term potential. It's a classic case of the hubris trap. They looked at their 130-year history and just couldn't believe this was the end of the road. They thought, we're Avon, we're an American icon, we don't get sold for parts.
And was the market convinced?
Not at all. The stock, which had been trading around that $23 offer price, just plummeted. By the end of 2012, it was down to $14. They didn't just miss the exit ramp. They watched it disappear in the rearview mirror.
That's just painful. But while the board is fighting off takeover bids in New York, something much darker is unraveling on the ground in China.
This is the corruption files, the China bribery scandal. And this is where that decentralized model really becomes toxic.
What exactly happened?
So China had banned direct selling back in 1998. The government saw it as potentially cult-like, a bit destabilizing. So to operate there legally, you needed these special, hard-to-get government licenses.
And Avon saw China as the next great frontier.
The growth engine. They were desperate to get in. So between 2004 and 2008, Avon's Chinese subsidiary spent over $8 million. But this wasn't on marketing or R&D.
It was on what?
It was on cash payments, lavish gifts, Louis Vuitton handbags, and all expenses paid luxury trips to Europe and the U.S. for Chinese government officials.
So straight up bribery.
Textbook violations of the U.S. Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, the FCPA.
But let's look at the human element of this for a second. Was this just a case of corporate villainy? A few bad apples?
I think you have to understand the immense pressure the managers in China were under. The entire direct selling model depends on being able to recruit new sellers. If the government bans recruitment, your business model literally ceases to exist overnight. There is no plan B. So when a local official quietly suggests that a trip to Paris or a new handbag might, grease the wheels for a license.
The managers on the ground didn't see it as a federal crime. They saw it as an operational expense.
Exactly. It was desperation. The Project Blackwood files include internal emails where they're openly discussing these gifts as just a necessary cost of doing business in that market.
And the craziest part, reading through the source material, is that the company's own internal audit team knew about this years earlier.
That's the real revelation moment here. Internal auditors spotted the risk as early as 2005. They flagged it. They recommended specific anti-bribery training, but that training was never implemented.
Why not?
The reason cited in the documents was lack of budget.
Lack of budget.
They decided to save, a few $1,000s On a compliance seminar, let's look at the final bill for that decision.
Lay it on us.
The regulatory fines from the Department of Justice and the SEC came to $135 million. But that's just the penalty. The cost of the internal investigation, the lawyers, the forensic accountants to clean up the mess, that was approximately $350 million.
So you're talking about a total cost of nearly $500 million, all because they didn't want to pay for training session.
$500 million. And even worse, it completely destroyed their momentum and their reputation in China. They tried to buy their way into a market because their organic model was illegal there, and the cover-up ended up costing more than the crime.
It's just a classic tragic case of short-term thinking, obliterating long-term value.
And it highlights this critical weakness in the direct selling model. When you have this massive, decentralized network of independent operators, enforcing compliance is an absolute nightmare. If you don't fund it properly, you're just sitting on a ticking time bomb.
So now we have crippling debt, a missed acquisition, and a massive bribery scandal. The wheels are officially starting to come off the wagon.
Act 5, the downfall, the unraveling.
And a new CEO arrives, Cherie McCoy.
Cherie McCoy takes over in 2012. She basically inherits a burning building. Her entire mandate is turnaround. And in the corporate world, turnaround is usually just a code word for pain.
It means cutting costs.
And it means the era of the empty halls. We have to talk about the physical footprint of the company just shrinking to nothing.
The sources specifically mention the facility in Springdale, Ohio.
Springdale's a heartbreaking example. This was a massive campus, employed almost 1,000 people at its peak, 940 people. It was a major manufacturing hub. By mid-2012, as part of the restructuring, they just shut it down. 400 jobs gone overnight.
And then suffer New York.
This one, historically, hits even harder. The Suffern Lab had been the heart and soul of Avon's R&D for 136 years. This is where Mrs. Alby's early perfumes evolved into the high-tech A&UW skincare. Closed. Abandoned.
And then, in 2016, they make a move that really signals the end of an era. They formally separate the North American business.
They spun it off into a new entity called New Avon LLC. In reality, they were quarantining the U.S. market. It was losing so much money they had to cut it loose to protect the more profitable international business, but it just created this confusing mess where Avon in America was a totally different company from Avon everywhere else.
But the bleeding didn't stop. And this brings us to the events of 2025, the commission crisis.
This is the moment they finally lost the workforce.
We talked about that human element being their greatest asset. What did they do to the humans?
Well, inflation was rising globally. Their own costs were going up. So Avon's management felt they needed to protect their profit margins. In June of 2025, they rolled out changes to the pay structure for their representatives, particularly in the UK and other key markets.
And I'm guessing not in a good way.
They capped the commissions on all fashion and home products at just 10%. Previously, a high-performing rep could earn up to 32% on those sales.
That's not a trim. That's a massive pay cut.
It's devastating. The source material breaks down the math. A silver-tier team leader, this is someone who is really hustling, a serious professional, would have to recruit around 60 new representatives into their downline just to make the same income they made the year before.
60 new people in a market that's already saturated.
It's an impossible task, and it fundamentally broke the social contract they had with their sales force. You saw top-tier talent, the modern-day Mrs. Alby's, the women who built this business, just walking away in droves.
So you've alienated your entire workforce, you've closed the factories, you've paid $500 million in fines, but there was one last ghost waiting in the closet, the lethal legacy.
The talc trap.
We've all heard about the talc lawsuits with Johnson & Johnson, but this hit Avon just as hard. And I want to get a little technical here because people hear talc and think baby powder, and they don't understand the real danger.
It's a geological problem. Talc is a mineral, magnesium silicate. It's the softest mineral on Earth, which is what makes it feel so silky and great for powders. The problem is, in the ground, talc deposits are often found interwoven with another mineral, asbestos.
They're geological neighbors.
More than neighbors. They can form in the exact same rock veins. So when you're mining talc, you're blasting rock, you're scooping it up. It is incredibly difficult to guarantee that you're getting 100% pure talc without also scooping up some stray asbestos fibers.
And asbestos isn't something you can just, wash out?
No. And that's the killer, literally. There is no known safe level of asbestos exposure. A single fiber can be enough. So when Avon's lawyers would argue in court, our talc is safe, And then a plaintiff's lawyer produces a lab report showing even trace amounts of asbestos in a vintage bottle of powder from 1975. The jury doesn't care about intent. They just see the mesothelioma diagnosis.
And the lawsuit started piling up.
Around 400 lawsuits, all alleging that Avon's talc products caused mesothelioma or ovarian cancer. And these were not small claims court cases.
Give us some of the verdict numbers.
In 2022, a California jury awarded $52.1 million to a single plaintiff. In 2024, another verdict out of Chicago for $24.4 million.
And when you have 400 of these cases pending and you're losing judgments for $50 million a pop?
You do the math. The potential liability is uncapped. It could run into the billions.
And that is the final trigger.
That is the trigger. The Chapter 11 filing in August 2024 was, at its core, a legal maneuver. Filing for bankruptcy triggers something called an automatic stay.
You mentioned Chapter 11. For those of us who aren't lawyers, does that mean the company is officially dead, or is it more of a timeout?
That's a great distinction. Chapter 11 is like the emergency room. You go there for drastic surgery, hoping to come out alive on the other side. Chapter 7, that's the funeral home. That's total liquidation. So Avon went to the ER, but the doctors, in this case the creditors and the courts, are arguing over who gets to keep the organs. The stay pauses all 400 of those lawsuits instantly. It forces all the plaintiffs into one big negotiation instead of letting them pick the company apart one verdict at a time.
So the bankruptcy wasn't because they couldn't sell lipstick anymore. It's because they literally could not afford their own pass.
A beauty company, ultimately brought down by an industrial-era safety hazard from 100 years ago. The irony is just profound.
So here we are, Act 6. Reflection and takeaways.
The dust is settling.
What does the final transaction actually look like?
It's a structured liquidation. Natura & Co., the Brazilian giant that owns The Body Shop and Aesop, they had already technically acquired Avon back in 2020. Now they're using the bankruptcy process to officially buy the non-U.S. operations, the parts that are still profitable, for about $125 million in credit.
And what about the rest, the hollowed-out U.S. entity?
The rest gets put into something called the Avon Liquidation Trust. It's basically a corporate graveyard. The trust's only purpose for existing is to sell off any remaining assets and pay out the creditors and the thousands of talc claimants.
It's the end of the line for the company that David McConnell founded.
The brand name survives, the logo survives. But the corporate soul, the company for women that started on Chambers Street, that is gone.
I want to play what if for just a minute.
Let's do it.
What if they had just taken the Coty deal back in 2012?
Well, the shareholders would have walked away with 23/3 a share, which looks like a dream in hindsight. The brand would have been integrated into a much larger, healthier machine. They might have avoided some of the desperate late-stage cost-cutting that ended up alienating all their reps. It would have been a dignified exit.
And what if they truly pivoted to e-commerce, say, 10 years earlier?
That's the even bigger question. Imagine if Avon had built the digital infrastructure for influencers back in 2005. They already had the network of 5 million people. If they'd given every single Avon lady her own personalized digital storefront back then, instead of clinging to the door-to-door model, they could have owned the Instagram era before Instagram even existed.
But instead, they let the world catch up to them and then pass them.
They did. And that brings us to the final Project Blackwood verdict.
Summarize it for us.
I think it boils down to 3 key failures. First, the direct selling paradox. The entire model is built on high trust. The bribery scandal and the talc lawsuits completely destroyed that trust. You can't sell something neighbor to neighbor if your neighbor starts to suspect you might be selling them carcinogens.
Right.
Second, the innovation trap. They were great at innovating products. ADW was a brilliant piece of science, but they completely failed to innovate the business model. While they were still focused on the doorbell, companies like Sephora and Ulta were making the act of buying makeup fun and experiential in a physical store.
And the third failure?
Business fragility. This shows how a 136-year-old legacy, an American icon, was completely dismantled in less than a decade. It proves that accumulated debt and a willful blindness to legal risks can kill even the biggest giants.
It's a sobering story.
It really is.
So what's the big takeaway for the listener? What does this all mean?
I think it means that legacy is not a safety net. It doesn't protect you. You have to re-earn your relevance every single day.
Right.
And you have to watch your balance sheet, your compliance policies, and your relationship with your human element like a hawk.
I want to leave you with one final thought. The ding-dong of the Avon lady has been permanently replaced by the gavel of a bankruptcy court judge. The brand name lives on under new ownership, but the era is definitively over.
The torch has been passed.
And here's the provocative question I want you to think about. In our modern age of influencers, affiliate links, and TikTok shop, everyone is now a direct seller. We're all recommending products to our own social circles online. So did Avon die because it failed? Or did it die because the rest of the world finally caught up to its original idea and just found a way to do it better?
That is the question.
Thanks for diving deep with us on Project Blackwood. We'll see you on the next file.
Stay curious.
Stay informed.